Hi, everybody. We're going to review Chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. I only have 15 minutes for this program, so let's jump right in. And it starts with a look of a big metaphor, which is the Valley of Ashes. And this is what it says: a desolate area of land. This is the Valley of Ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills, and grotesque gardens where ashes take the form of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally with transcendent, you should know that word by now, effort of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Now, this is a big metaphor. It's literally not made of ash, but this is the poorer, lower class area between East and West Egg that they take to go to the city. And basically, what it is saying is how the rich see the poor. They see them as ash. And as you know, ash is something that has, once fire has burned away, it's the remnant. So it's like all the leftover stuff that is slowly just sort of gets blown away. So that's how the poor look to the rich in the novel, like they're equivalent to ash, like they don't even matter. And you're going to see that continue on. And it comes up in this chapter with Mr. and Mrs. Wilson and Myrtle and what's going on there. And anytime they're in the Valley of Ash, you're going to see some bad stuff goes on. It's like a wasteland, like a post-apocalyptic, terrible place. And what's there? The other big thing that he notices, another big metaphor, is the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. Continuing on the next page, they sink down himself into eternal blindness, but his eyes, dimmed a little by many paintless days under the sun and rain, brood on over the solemn dumping ground. So this is the thing that looks over the valleys of ash. It's this old optometrist painting. That's what it is. The symbol is in the reality of the book, and that means an eye doctor, but it hasn't been taken care of. And this is all a metaphor for the fact that there is no God, that idea. So these big eyes, literally looking down from the sky, a clear symbol for God, right, are uncared for and sort of like don't matter anymore, have been forgotten. And he picks his words so much. He calls them eternal. He calls them blind. He says there's no face, non-existent. He's sort of laying it on here. And again, this goes with the idea that there is no God. And what's really important about it, which means that where do we get our morals from? If we don't get them from a supreme being, we have to live for that. Why should we live? And that was one of the big questions of modern man. And you're going to see that the people in the novel sort of don't live for each other like you should. They live for all terrible things. And so that is sort of the big idea. And we have this big metaphor about the eyes of Dr. TJ. Keep it in mind that when we go into the Valley of Ash, and especially the eyes of Dr. TJ that are overlooking this, when they come up, bad stuff goes down. Because, again, the absence of God in this terrible wasteland-like place. And that's going to set up all the bad stuff. It's like a bad omen for what goes on in this chapter, because we meet Tom's mistress. Nick says he doesn't want to meet her, but he did. We see Nick sort of just goes along with it, and that is due to alcohol. Alcohol is going to be used as a sort of metaphor, symbol, whatever you want to call it, that anytime people are drinking, the values are going to decline, things are going to go bad. So let's continue. They go into the city. They talk about Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. He owns a gas station and stuff. He admits that she is attractive. Tom goes on that if this place wasn't terrible enough, when they go into the Valley of Ash, he calls it a terrible place, isn't it? He says it's good for Myrtle to get away. He calls Wilson dumb, so this is a lot more looking down on the poor. If I didn't explain the metaphor, then it just comes out from Tom. And then we learn on page 31 that Tom buys her things when she is with him. They go in the city, he buys a lot of stuff, including a dog, and this makes her incredibly happy. And we're going to see that Myrtle is only with Tom for the moolah, for the money. And that's how she rates people and values them. She's incredibly materialistic. So Mrs. Wilson, Myrtle, is incredibly materialistic. And then they go over to Fifth Avenue. I believe they go to a hotel. Nick mentions, we see Nick's innocence here. He mentions he's been drunk just twice in his life. And this is one of the times that afternoon. So that's how sort of innocent Nick is. We're going to see the alcohol sort of plies him to sort of stay in this situation and go along with all the horrible stuff he sees. Um, he gets on a first name basis with Myrtle pretty much right away. So we see the booze sort of eases him into this. When he said I didn't even want to meet her before, now he's calling her Myrtle, and they're all hanging out. Um, and there's just a lot of going back and forth. I won't go over it all, but how a lot of husbands and wives don't trust each other. We see the McKees and their sort of terrible relationship, and people talking about who's cheating on who and all this bad stuff. And then very interesting, Myrtle, the second she sort of gets out of the Valley of the Ash and is in this like rich world, this is what she says to one of the about one of the servants they have, the people getting them drinks and stuff. I told that boy about the ice. Myrtle raised her eyebrows in despair at the shiftlessness of the lower orders. She is the lower orders. The second she gets out of there, she thinks, everyone is suddenly beneath her and stuff. So you're going to see she's very petty in that sense. And then we get the first thing about Gatsby. He just sort of jumps in, and someone says, "Oh, do you know him?" And Nick mentions he lives next door to him, which we knew. And they say, well, they see he's a nephew or a cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm. That's where all his money comes from. Really? She nodded. I'm scared of him, and I hate to have him get anything on me. So this is a very gossipy and negative retort or look at Gatsby from these people, because Kaiser Wilhelm was the leader of either Germany or Prussia. I checked my history during World War One. That was the Axis powers. That was the enemy from us in America. We were the allies, and we fought with France and England and stuff, just like in World War II. So to saying that he got all his money or is a nephew or cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm is like he works for the bad guy. And then they go on to say, oh, I'd be scared if he had anything on me. So we set up some mystery here of Gatsby and that he got his money from a terrible place. And it just sort of jumps away. And we'll get more on Gatsby later. They mentioned getting a divorce. That, hey, why don't you just divorce your husband if you're with Tom? And, mentioning a divorce would be very scandalous. Still scandalous today, but certainly back then. We see, I'm not going to get into it because it's a racial epithet, but the McKees use one and talk about looking down on a certain group of people, and they're being anti-Semitic, so they're racist as well. Aren't these people wonderful? Myrtle admits that she doesn't like her husband. He isn't fit to lick her shoe, and the reason why we find out on page 39 is he had to borrow a wedding dress, and once he realized that, she was like, oh my god, he's so poor, and he'll never make money and stuff, so she hated him right away. More reason why she's with Tom. And then it goes on. I'll let you read it on page 40 and 41, but why she's sort of attracted to this rich lifestyle, and she basically admits that she's only with Tom for money. And that she sort of has it in her mind that eventually maybe he'll leave Daisy. The thing is, Tom's never going to leave Daisy because she's of the lower class. She's not of the high status that Daisy comes from. It's never going to happen. And he basically puts her in his place. He mentions more of spending Tom's money. And then when she brings up Daisy, she says, Daisy, 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 shouted Mr. Wilson. I'll say it whenever I want to. They're getting in an argument about it. And then Tom, making a short, deft movement, Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. He slaps her in front of everyone and breaks her nose. God, what is with these people? So what happens in this chapter is Nick really starts to descend into their world, like I said, plied by alcohol. And so we got this hint in chapter 1, they're bad people. Now we really see it in action. And everyone around them, too. We get these McKees who are racist. And on page 42, I won't go into too much detail, but Mr. McKee attempts to take advantage of Nick. Sexually, I'm talking about. He's blackout, so he misses those ... He misses some time. He skips it. He's going down the elevator, and then it says ... I was standing beside his bed, Mr. McKee's, and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in his underwear, with a great portfolio in his hands. Then they mentioned some words, and then I was lying half asleep in the cold lower level of the Pennsylvania station. I mentioned earlier that Nick, he says he's not naive, but as that is where he ends up. As the book starts, he misses this stuff completely, and again gets drunk and sort of falls into their world. And you at one point can't blame him, but you also be like, dude, how stupid can you be to not notice that these people are just awful through and through? Let's see if he can notice it and what he's going to do about it, if anything. And so look for that because he's going to be tested very much in the next chapter when we meet Gatsby and he goes to one of their parties. And if you thought they were sort of acting the fool now, getting drunk, someone's breaking their nose, other guy's getting half naked, they're talking about racist stuff, they're gossiping, they're doing all this terrible about how much money they spend and blah, 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 blah. Just wait until they're at one of Gatsby's parties where it's just no holds barred craziness. The first description on page 43 into 44 and even 45 of Gatsby's parties is just amazing. So enjoy that. See what happens. We're going to meet Gatsby, and the real plot of the story is going to start to really develop. We've built up the characters now. We see who they are, and now here we go. We're in this terrible, sort of awful world of greed and materialism and declining values. How is Nick going to survive, if he's going to survive it at all? Okay, so that was the Chapter 2 review. Miss you guys. Hope you're doing well. And, stay healthy, stay safe, and, hang on until the end of the term there. We're almost there. All right, bye-bye now.